The final thing that we're going to be doing on the site that we're working on is add some custom CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and this allows you to design your site with greater control over what the page looks like and how it may behave. Adding custom CSS in a WordPress website allows you to change the website's layout and appearance beyond the standard options. By doing this, you will have complete creative control. In order to add custom CSS, you will need to have an understanding of how CSS actually works and functions on a website. I have found that being a WordPress developer who also understands code is a great enhancement, as you can leverage your knowledge of CSS and really tweak and adjust things that may not be readily styled by using the theme's settings. Let's take a look at how we can do this. Our website is looking pretty good, but there are a few areas of the website that I don't really love and I would like to be able to augment. One of the things is the stars are not center aligned. And even though we had specified this by using the settings that were available to us, this did not update. This is a perfect candidate for some custom CSS. I've found that the easiest way to figure out what element or what hook you need to apply the CSS to is to access your developer tools. Currently, I am using the Chrome browser, and I will go ahead and open up my developer tools. These can be accessed by going to the three dots at the top of the browser and then going down to More Tools. And although you can't see this, there's a flyout menu that does say Developer Tools. Alternatively, you can simply right-click or control-click anywhere on the page and click Inspect. This will also open the developer tools. Once you have the developer tools open, if you use this little icon, this will allow you to select an element. You can see as I mouse over the various parts of my web page, they become highlighted. This is allowing me to identify this exact area of the website. I'm going to go ahead and click on one of the stars. What I actually want to access is this parent div that is containing all of the stars. As you mouse over these elements, you can click on them and see the CSS that is being used to style these elements. I'm going to make this portion of my page a little bit larger. As I'm looking at this, I can tell that these elements are not block elements, which means that if I did something like text align center, that would not allow the stars to be aligned to the center. So I'm just going to continue to move up within this area of my website so that I can find what is the parent element. In this case, it happens to be this div. And if we look down at some of the CSS, you can see that there is a rule that is aligning the items using Flex Start. If this was turned off, now the stars would be center aligned. Because I've identified that this is happening on the containing element, I may be able to check in WordPress and see if this is an option. That's the first place that I'll look. So I will go back to my dashboard. I'm going to go to the About Us page. I'll edit the page, and I'm going to scroll down to where we have our testimonial elements. I'll open up the document overview so that I can more easily access this area of my page. I'm going to click on the testimonial container as this is the overarching container. I am guessing that this probably isn't the container that we want to access. It's probably these individual containers. So let's go ahead and click one of the individual containers, and then we'll look through and see if we see anywhere in this specific area which might be setting the behavior to Flex Start. You can see that if I go into the layout section, we are using Flex, and we have align items to center, which should be center aligning these elements. If I was to put this to Flex Start, I don't really see a change, so this might not be the hook that we actually need. If we open this container up, there's also a stack, and this also could be controlling it. So actually, now that I have this selected, I can see that the justification on the stack is set to flex start. So if we go ahead and justify these items to the center, this should take care of our issue. As you can see, I don't really see any change within WordPress. So sometimes what you see in the WordPress visual view is not the same as what you're going to see in the actual rendered portion of your website. When I click refresh, there is no change. So this is probably something that is being controlled in some other way. I'm not really sure exactly what it is that's styling the elements in this way. So in this case, we're going to have to use the CSS root. What I'll do here is I'll go ahead and I'll make note of this particular class. This is where we have the align items flex start. Now, because this class is somewhat generic, WP container core group is layout 8, I'll want to double check and see if the other containers have that same name. So currently I'm looking at the last testimonial. I'll go ahead and I'll go up to the next element. I'm going to open up this div, and here is my next element. I believe this is the same one. So you can see this is called WP-container core group is layout 6. In this case, because I'm using this testimonial element on multiple pages, this is probably not a great candidate for me to use for a class selector. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into WordPress, and if we go into the advanced area and open up the advanced category, we can add our own unique CSS classes. What I'll do is I'll select the nested container that is within testimonial, and then I'm going to apply a class to that element. So we're going to use a class of testimonial wrapper. I'm going to make sure that all of my containers have that same class. So I will select the next container, and I'm going to add the same class, testimonial wrapper, and then I'll do that to the third container. I'll click save, and if we go back to the front end portion of our website and we refresh our page, you should see that somewhere in this HTML code that is being displayed here, we should now have our testimonial wrapper. So now that I have this particular class on the overarching container of this element, I can use this to help me to overwrite what's happening with the stars. I'm going to be using this class of testimonial wrapper, but I also have to get this element here. And if we look at all of our testimonial elements, you can see that each one has its own unique class name, but there's a bunch of class names in here. So this one has a class name of WP block group. If we go to one of the other testimonial elements and we open this up, this one also has a WP block group. So that's what I'm going to use for my custom CSS, since all of the testimonial elements are going to have that class assigned to them. Now that we have that information, we're going to go back to WordPress. We'll go ahead and we'll go into the dashboard. I'm going to go to Appearance and Customize. In the Customizer, we have an option to add additional CSS. This is where you can add your own custom CSS. So if I write a class of testimonial wrapper, space, and then we put dot, and we're going to use this WP-block-group, then I'll open my curly braces, and inside I'm going to use a CSS rule that will overwrite this flex start. So basically what I want to do here is I want to change align items to be center. So we'll go ahead and we'll add align items, center, semicolon. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to publish this change. If we now go back to this page and we refresh, you can now see that the stars have been center aligned. So this is taking care of our issue. Now you may recall that we also used the testimonial elements on our contact page. So if we go to the contact page, the stars are not being center aligned here. And that's because these elements don't contain the custom class of testimonial wrapper. I'll go ahead and I'll go back to the Pages area. I'm going to go into Contact and I'll click Edit. We'll go down to the bottom and let's open List View. I'll simply select each of the containers. I'll go to the Advanced tab, and then I'll add the additional CSS of Testimonial Wrapper. I'm going to go ahead and do that on each container. So I'm doing that 3 times. I'll hit Save. And now if I refresh the contact page, these stars are being aligned to the center as well. This probably would have been a good thing to resolve earlier, since then I would not have to continually keep adding this class to all of these. Keep in mind that these testimonial elements are part of a pattern that I had created earlier. So if I go into my pattern for the testimonials and we edit the pattern, I can go ahead and add the classes to the pattern element. This will ensure that every time I want to add this pattern to another section of my website or another web page, this class will be assigned to those elements by default. That's the first element that I wanted to adjust. The next thing that I'm going to do is on my contact page, and I actually have 2 things that I want to change here. The first thing that I'd like to augment is I'd like these little icons to be a little bit bigger. So once again, using the developer tools, I'm going to click this icon, which allows me to select an element. I'll select on the icon, and then you can see that this is an SVG. Now, the SVG is currently being styled to have a width, a height, and a font size of 16 pixels. If we adjust the font size to, let's say, 25 pixels, that by itself is not going to change anything. But if we also change our width and our height, you will see that now the icons appear to be much larger. So this is the element that I want to add custom CSS to. In this case, I'm going to copy the last part of this selector, and we'll just copy the changes that we made as well. The last part of the selector is the class that is on this span tag that wraps around the SVG. So if we look right here, you can see it says UAGB-icon-list_source wrap, and that's what's being used here, space SVG. If we use that as a selector and augment these 3 declarations, that should resolve this. So again, I'm going to go back to the dashboard, Appearance, Customize. We'll go into our additional CSS, and I'm simply going to write another rule. If you're writing a lot of rules, you might want to use a CSS comment so that you can just stay organized and remind yourself what this rule is for. So I'm just going to say increase icon list size. And while we're at it, we will add a comment up here at the top, and we'll say center stars. I'm going to publish, and if we come back to the contact page and refresh, that did not take care of this issue. The reason why is because this particular selector is more specific. So in this case, we have 2 options. We could go ahead and use the rest of these classes in front of the class that we used, or we could use the important modifier. You can see down here, important is being used. Important is a part of the CSS specification that will override other, and in some cases, less specific selectors. You need to be careful about using important, because if you use it too much, you're going to have problems styling your CSS. I generally try to avoid it, but sometimes when you're working with WordPress, you'll have to use the important modifier. In this case, let's just try to copy this rest of this rule. We'll go back to the backend part of WordPress, and I'm simply going to paste this in front of the selector that we previously had. And for whatever reason, it copied everything. So I'm just going to get rid of this part since that is currently here. And that should work. Let's click publish. We'll refresh this, and now you can see that the icons are being styled at the larger size like we wanted. The final thing that I want to do on this page is I don't like how my radio button labels look different from the other labels that we have on the page. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the other labels and I'm going to see how they are being styled. I can see here that they are using a font size of 15 pixels and it looks like the color is different too. So they're using our global color of 676767. Now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll select the labels on the radio buttons. And you can see I have the label for the radio buttons right here. So these elements are wrapped inside of a div that has this class name. And it looks like all of the labels and the divs are located inside of this element. To make things a little bit easier, I think I'm just going to add a custom class. What we'll do is we'll go back to the dashboard. I'm going to go to Pages, All Pages. We'll go to Contact and click Edit. I'm going to open my list view and we'll go to our form. And then I'm going to select the radio elements within the form. We'll come to Advanced right here. And if we open the Advanced option, we can add our own custom CSS. I'm going to call this Radio List. I'll save this. And now if we refresh our page and we look at this section of the web page, you should notice that within the radio button section, we should now have our custom class of Radio List. And it looks like it's located right here. It's kind of truncating that onto another line. So here's the Radio List. This div is going to, of course, wrap around all of the radio buttons. So if we use .radio list space label, that should hook our labels. So let's go back to the backend part of WordPress. Once again, I'm going to go into Customize, Additional CSS, and we'll add a new rule here. Let's just make a comment. And then we'll go ahead and we'll use a .radio list space label. And here I'm going to specify that I want the font size to be 15 pixels and I want the color to be 676767. And we will publish this. And if we go back to the front end and refresh, you can now see how the labels match the other labels on my form. This part of the web page is looking great. The final page that I want to make a modification on is my blog page. And I don't really like the pagination selection. So when you're actually on a particular page, it highlights as a square and it shows as green. I did not see a place where I could modify that within this theme. So I'm just going to add some custom CSS. So I will select that element and you can see that this is a span element. It has a class of current on it. I believe I can use .pagenumbers.current as a selector. It looks like this might be part of the selector. So let's just see where that's coming from. This AST-pagination. I think that has to do with the Astra theme pagination. So yeah, let's grab this whole area. And I'm going to be adjusting the border color and the background color. You can see that these are coming in from the theme. They're bringing in the green color. So I want to change this to be a gray, and I also want to round it so it's rounded. So let's see if we can make that work. I will go ahead and I will make a comment here. This is going to say blog pagination. I'll go ahead and I'll paste in the code that I just had. So here is my selector. I don't need to do anything on color, so I'm going to get rid of that. And for border color, we're going to go ahead and use our 676767. And for background color, we're going to use the same value. And then finally, I'm going to set the border radius, and we'll set this to 50%. And it looks like I did not spell radius correctly. So let's just make that modification, because with CSS, if you don't spell it correctly, it doesn't work. I will publish this. And if we go back to one of our blog pages and refresh, you can see that now this little icon has updated. It's gray and it's a circle. and that should be styling in that way on every page. As you can see, using a little bit of custom CSS can really allow you to refine your website and adjust any of those little inconsistencies or elements that aren't working in the exact way that you would like them to. Sometimes you cannot modify everything on a theme, but knowing some CSS will give you the power to be able to figure out what is controlling that element, and then you can add your own custom CSS and override those things. I hope you've learned a lot about building websites in WordPress and that this has given you a leg up on developing websites in general. I hope you feel more comfortable in building web pages and have a good understanding of how WordPress functions and how you can wrangle it so that your websites look exactly how you want them to look. Happy developing!